How's it going, everyone? Rosalind here. A number of times throughout my streams of Octopath Traveler 2, I've been asked what job combos I use and why I use them. So one day when asked, I decided to take a little bit of time out of the stream to walk through the main job combos I use and explain my reasonings. And I thought it might be helpful to go ahead and edit that clip up and post it here on YouTube for anyone looking for direction on some good combos. Just note that I don't go into every character and their job combinations, only the ones that I primarily use, and you may have found other combinations that worked better for you. But in posting this, I do hope that it will serve as a good basis to start from for anyone struggling, or to provide some inspiration to start experimenting themselves to find other interesting and powerful combinations. However, before that, I would like to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, Kabam, and their upcoming new game, King Arthur Legends Rise. Recently revealed at this year's GDC, King Arthur Legends Rise is an upcoming turn-based RPG for both PC and mobile devices set in the Kingdom of Avalon, where you take on the role of a young King Arthur as he seeks to rebuild Camelot and the battle-torn realm of Avalon to its former glory. You will embark on a dark and mysterious campaign as you explore the kingdom, taking on quests, battling monsters, and building an ever-expanding party of knights, mages, rogues, and other powerful and iconic characters of Arthurian legend. As stated, the battles are turn-based, with the actual order being visible in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. When it is your turn, you can select which action you want to take, with each action having a cost associated with it, represented by the action count bar in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, with the character's equipped relic, that being the weapon they have equipped, determining what actions they're able to take. Choosing the right characters and relics for a given situation is key to overcoming the game's many challenges. If King Arthur Legends Rise sounds like a game you'd be interested in, and you want to help support me in the process, be sure to click the link in the video description and add the game to your Steam wishlist today. There is even an open beta test starting on March 27th in select regions if you want to try the game out for yourself ahead of time. Thank you so much to Kabam and King Arthur Legends Rise for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back into the content. Can I go over the characters I use regularly and their jobs, and the reason I use the job combinations? Yeah, sure, I can do that. We've gotten that question quite a bit, so we could actually turn this into like a recording or something. We can link to it when people ask. So I guess we'll start then with my main character I chose was Agnea the dancer. I actually really like having Agnea as my main character, mainly because of the ability to have a follower follow you around. I like having this particular follower here for the HP and SP, but there's a lot of good options. I've actually done a video on it. You can check my YouTube for that. But I like her. The other option I would have chosen if I hadn't chosen her was actually to choose Ochette, because I like having access to all of her monsters and stuff. Gives her a lot of utility, a lot of AoE abilities. But I like using the dancer, which is my main character. And as for the job, I've kind of two jobs I really use on her. The main one is the inventor. Inventor gives her access to a lot of really useful support abilities. Even though the dancer can do a lot of damage in this game, for the most part it's a support class. So obviously you have the different dances that she can use, which can be used to not only buff your party members, but I mainly actually use them just for refilling SP on my party members, or if I decide to swap them up for like the BP buff or the latent power gauge buff, it increases that for them. That's the main reason I use her dances, except for her divine skill. I like to use her divine skill on my main healer, who is actually Casti. This just makes it to where all of her single target abilities become AoE. So that's a thing I like to do in boss battles. Other stuff I like to do, and one of the main reasons I like to use the inventor, is because a lot of these abilities pair really well with Agnea, both with her divine skill from her dancer job and from her latent power gauge. So when using the springy boots, which is, you know, her buff that lets, you know, the target act first at the beginning of each turn, this will become AoE if you're under the effects of her divine skill or latent power skill. Same thing with the critical scope, though that I generally keep this one a single target, usually for boss fights. What I'll do for the crit scope is when I realize that we're going to be breaking the enemy, I'll go ahead and throw this up such that it's still on the enemy while it's broken, and it basically just makes it to where all the damage I deal into the enemy at that point becomes AoE. I also like using the elemental bomb. This is another good one that's nice to make AoE with her latent power gauge, because it allows you to just rapidly break enemies if you know their elemental weaknesses. Tin Horn, really good for filling up the latent power gauge of all your allies. But what's really broken with the inventor and Agnea, you can use Arkar's coil once you get access to this, and if you fully boost this and use it, it will fully restore the HP and SP of all your allies and give them up to 4 BP, and it'll revive anyone who's dead. So really good skill. Also, while we're talking about the inventor, I keep a step ahead on every single character. Step ahead is really broken, lets all your characters act first in battle. probably one of the best support skills in the game. When I'm not using the Inventor, I like to use the Merchant on Agnea. And the main reason I do this, and the main time I do this, is when I am going through one of the character stories for one of the characters who's not really like a main party member who I use all the time. They tend to fall behind in both levels and job points. And so I like making use of, once again, Agnea's latent power to make all of my abilities AoE, and then use Arrow of Fortune in order to hit a bunch of mobs with Arrow of Fortune and gain just a whole bunch of job points rapidly. Usually I accomplish this by giving her boost start and full power as support skills from the Merchant class. This makes it to where at the beginning of every battle, she'll obviously have her latent power gauge full, and she'll have an extra BP. And then I can just use her latent power and just fire off an Arrow of Fortune and just farm a bunch of job points as I'm going through the world. Usually when I come to a boss though, I will swap off of the Merchant, but those are the two jobs on Agnea that I use the most often. The other character, the next character who's been a mainstay in my party since pretty much the beginning, is Casti. She's kind of been my main healer. Despite being my main healer, she actually is one of my better attackers. Poison Axe deals a lot of damage from the Apothecary. Sweeping Cleave is one of the earliest access you get to AoE damage. That's really nice. And later on in the game, once you get access to Doter's Charity, this is really, really good, especially once you go to the black market and you buy a bunch of items that allow you to completely abuse the ability to use items on your entire party. Very good stuff. But I like to pair her with the Cleric. Cleric gives her early access to AoE healing. It gives her access to elemental and physical damage mitigation, which is really nice. It gives her an AoE revive, though this is less important because I also like to cast the Dancer's Divine skill on Casti, which makes Healing Touch AoE. So this kind of fills the role of heal wounds and revive at the same time, but the redundancy is nice to have. And then also, I like having access to Luminescence for more AoE damage, and Sacred Shield has actually saved me a number of times by making this, especially when you make this AoE, again with the Dancer's ability. So I like having all that on her. Another thing I have done with Casti quite often is I have put her on Scholar, and I usually do this if I'm in a situation where I feel like I'm not going to need the defensive utility of the Cleric, and in those situations I'll just put her on the Scholar because it just, gives her access to more elements, allows her to do more AoE damage, hit more elements. Having Analyze is really nice to have. So those are kind of the two jobs that I use with Casti the most often. I don't really put her on anything else other than those two though. The last mainstay for my party is Ochette. Ochette, I have, for the most part, for most of the game, I actually didn't really use a sub-job on her. Like, I gave her one for the purpose of having access to extra weapons. So I gave her Warrior for a long time to give her, more weapons to hit more weaknesses. But for the most part, I actually just used her for her pets for a lot of the game. Her pets and her latent power gauge. Having access to Precise Shot is also really nice from the Hunter class itself. The Divine skill can be pretty nice, but generally with her, it was her pets doing the majority of the work for a good portion of the game until I unlocked Arms Master. And then I gave her Arms Master, which obviously gives her access to all the weapons, gives her access to Sixfold Strike, which is really good for figuring out the weaknesses to enemies. Basically, it figures out all of their physical weaknesses. And then you have to figure out their elemental weaknesses after that. The main skills I actually use, though, on the Arms Master is Sixfold Strike and Lionheart's Axe. Lionheart's Axe has become my main damage source for boss fights and strong enemies with Ochette once I got access to it through the Arms Master. I know a lot of people like to put Arms Master on Hikari, but I found I really like it on Ochette because there's a couple other jobs I actually prefer on Hikari, which I guess brings us to the third slot. The third slot I like to rotate. I actually rotate it a lot because that's the slot that ends up being like whoever's story quest I'm on, or if I'm on a story quest, my fourth main character is Partitio. So I like having Partitio on here because he pairs extremely well with the Arcanist subjob. So the Arcanist subjob, the way this works is you use Seal of Diffusion. Seal of Diffusion makes it to where all buffs that you would use on yourself or abilities you would use that target only yourself will become AoE and hit your entire party. Well, this means you can make Rest hit your entire party. This means you can make Sidestep hit your entire party, which is very broken, and it makes it to where he becomes one of your best healers because you can just rest and heal HP, SP, and cure all the status ailments of your party members, or you can start stacking up to 9 sidesteps, so you basically ignore physical damage. And that's the main thing I like to use him for. I have used Seal of Immortality pretty often. No, I won't say pretty often, but for a couple boss fights, I've used Seal of Immortality, which also becomes AoE under Seal of Diffusion. And I also like to use Seal of Eternity, his divine skill, in order to make it to where Seal of Diffusion is a permanent buff. So the way I do this is I make sure that Partitio has full power as one of his support skills. So he starts off with his latent power gauge. And in a boss fight, what I'll do is on the first turn of his, I'll cast Seal of Diffusion on himself. And then when his second turn comes up, when he has no other buffs except for Seal of Diffusion, then I'll use Seal of Eternity. I'll use his latent power to get full BP. That way I can fully boost him and be able to use Seal of Eternity, and I'll hit him with Seal of Eternity. And because Seal of Diffusion is the only buff on him, it will guarantee hit Seal of Diffusion, and that'll make Seal of Diffusion a permanent buff for the rest of the fight. So that's a little combo I like to use with him a lot. He's kind of trivialized a lot of content because of that. So if you want a challenge, I would not recommend doing this. It does trivialize a lot of content by doing this, but it's also really fun at the same time. Another use of Seal of Eternity that I like is casting it on Casti. So specifically, I will put up the Dancer's divine skill on Casti, and then I'll use Seal of Eternity to make that permanent. You can also put up the Apothecary's divine skill, Doter's Charity, and make that permanent as well. Basically, making skills permanent with Seal of Eternity is really broken. The only thing you have to watch out for is that if there are multiple skills that can be chosen to become permanent, not every buff can be permanent, but if there are some buffs that can be chosen to become permanent, like if you have multiple, so you say you have a defense buff and Seal of Diffusion up on Partitio when you cast it, then it'll randomly choose between the two. So you just gotta watch out for that, but very, very good combination. And that'll do it for this video on job combinations in Octopath Traveler 2. I know this video didn't provide combos for every character, but hopefully it did serve as a good basis to start from, and maybe even taught you something new. Either way, if you have any questions about this video, Octopath Traveler 2, or any other game that I cover, feel free to hit me up over on Twitch at twitch.tv/RoslinGaming, or my Discord server, both of which are linked in the video description below. Until next time, take care.